from question 5. Tefa, thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
Sorry,
Thank
Jordan.
you. But you forgot my beautiful and amazing
Oh,
friend
James, let me add James.
in the fight, James.
James,
Everybody
add
welcome
James.
James. The
Thank
crowd
you.
goes crazy. Woo!
Tefa and James, take it away.
Thank you to the 116 people that are still here with us. I know it's tough, but it's a good thing that we're all here, because there's 5 good questions. 5 good things could happen in Massachusetts, and we're gonna make it happen. And we are that 5th one, so we're gonna try to keep it short, but also feel free to ask as many questions as you need to. My name is Estefania Galvis. I was born in Colombia. I've been in Massachusetts for a year, but I've been a service worker before. And I have been working with James and the One for Wage team to get here. And I also want to recognize that Jonathan and Progressive Mass have been incredibly supportive for a long time. So we're very excited to have gotten to this final step with all of you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got here, and then James is going to tell you a little bit more about the particulars of the question. And so I'm going to pass it over to James so that they can introduce themselves, and then we'll get started and go really quick.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for still being here. This is practice for when you receive your ballot, because we are going to be on the very last page and likely on the back. So this is good practice. You got to stick with it to make sure people get paid a fair wage. So hi, everyone. James Wu, he, him, his pronouns. I am the campaign manager for Yes on 5, although some of you might also know me when I wear my other Feel First hats. But tonight I'm here with my Yes on 5 hat and really appreciating everyone for sticking around. So back to you, Tefa.
Yeah, so very briefly, as we all probably are familiar with, to be able to get a ballot question to this level, there has been multiple thousands and hundreds of thousands of signatures collected by community members, by workers across the state of Massachusetts. And here we are. Through that process, we also attempted to have a legislative fight. However, that did not work out, as we all know. So we decided that the best way to do this was to put it in the decision making of the people of Massachusetts. This question is very relevant, not only for Massachusetts, but to the region. And also we are one of the top issues that people are worried about and want change on in the country right now, which is economic justice and fairness. And so we worked and did intense buildup of strength and narrative with workers throughout the last year, and that has brought us to being Yes on 5, the question that allows for minimum wages and tips on top. And James is now going to tell you a little bit more about the particulars of our legislation.
Great, thank you, Tefa. So our ballot initiative will do 2 parts. The first is it will raise the tipped minimum wage, which right now in Massachusetts is only $6.75 an hour, less than half of the $15 an hour that I know a lot of us had fought for years ago in Massachusetts. So it would raise the tip minimum wage to match the full minimum wage across the state slowly over the course of 5 years. So it will increase by, I think it will be like a 20% raise every year until we reach $15 an hour. And tips will continue to exist. Tips will still be on top of a worker's minimum wage. It's just that they will also see a really nice raise in their base wages. The second part of the ballot initiative would also allow restaurants and bars, after the 5 years are over and after all tip workers are making the full minimum wage, to also give restaurants and bars the option to include back of house workers in tip pools that already exist. This would include people like cooks, dishwashers, who also play an important role in making sure the customer has a really good dining experience. But, you know, right now, Massachusetts is one of the only 2 states that excludes back of house workers from tip pools, even after minimum wage, tip minimum wage workers are making the full minimum wage. So, so that's kind of what the ballot question would do. I do want to take a moment to just address some things that we've heard a lot from people that we talk to when we're on the streets, that we've heard when we were gathering signatures for this. And the first one is the opposition is going to claim that tips will go away after this ballot question passes. And that is honestly just a straight up lie. It's not even a nice little white lie like Santa Claus, but it's just a lie. There are 7 other states that have one fair wage that pay their servers and bartenders a full minimum wage with tips on top. And in those states, restaurants continue to thrive. Tipping still exists. In fact, I visited 2 of those states last year. There were restaurants. Nothing has, like, the sky has not fallen. So I do just want to lift that up as something that you will likely hear if you turn on the TV or if you like go on YouTube or anywhere. So that is going to be the most common misconception and lie that the opposition will bring up. The other pieces are, like I mentioned, tips are not going to go away. They will continue to exist because we as a culture have thought of tips as a reward for really good service. But instead, right now, consumers are actually subsidizing these low wages that are paid by large corporations that just don't want to pay their workers the full minimum wage. Restaurants will continue to thrive. Menu prices are not going to go up exponentially. Again, we can see this happening in all of the other states that already have one fair wage. Restaurant prices are still like the same as Massachusetts. Tips are the same, if not higher, in these one fair wage states. And workers are getting paid more. So all in all, vote yes on 5. I don't know if Tefa, there's like more you want to add.
Just want to say that as you were saying this, I just remembered that in Colombia we pay minimum wages plus tips on top. So if Colombia can do it, I think Massachusetts can do it. It just came to mind. No, I think that it's late. People have been sitting in their computers for a long time. So let's get to the questions and let's get to have people move along. So Jonathan, let's get some questions.
Let's see. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. Let me see. If I'm not seeing any questions yet, I will give you a quick questions. What states have already done this?
Oh, I have this memorized now. So California, Alaska, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Minnesota.
Is it Montana that you're missing?
Montana is the one I'm missing, and Michigan recently became the 8th state to have one fair wage. On top of that, there are several municipalities that have one fair wage, including Chicago and Washington, D.C.
No, great. And so I see a question in the chat about how does it work that wages go up and how do restaurants pay that without raising prices?
That is a great question. And prices might go up. They will go up, but like it's going to be super minimal. There are a lot more things facing a restaurant than just labor costs, things like inflation, which is impacting all of us. Like when you go get groceries, eggs are like $5 more expensive now. So that kind of rising food costs and rising costs in just general existence, those things are also going to be impacting a restaurant. And we've seen from these other states that restaurants are able to pay higher minimum wages without having to, like, for example, triple the price of a plate of pasta or something like that. I will also note that, oh, sorry. No. So one more thing, and then I'll let Tefa go. This takes place over 5 years. This is a very slow increase, and restaurants will have plenty of time to kind of get used to paying those higher wages for their workers. Again, it's not all happening at the same time. It's happening over 5 years, which is a really long time. And restaurants will have that time to slowly get used to it and slowly figure out how to make things work.
Yeah, and I mean, as it stands right now, as customers, we're subsidizing the wages. So we are gonna pay less actually uh, for the labor. But the real point here too also is that this is a situation that one of the biggest costs that happens in a restaurant is turnover. People
Mhm.
don't stay at the job. And when people get paid well, people stay at their job and people stay at their job long. So there's going to be a cost efficiency that is going to come from this more than a deficiency. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone.
I'm going to make one quick comment and go to other chats. I would also think that real estate is a big fixed cost in what a restaurant, like any restaurant, has to evaluate their prices much more so than the labor cost.
Yeah, and I would say that like the workers already are showing up, opening the restaurant, running the food, running everything, right? Like, why is it also the responsibility of the workers to carry their wages or hours?
So a question in the chat of who decides how tips are shared or not shared with other workers in the restaurant?
So that happens after the 5-year implementation. It's something that happens all over the country. It's decided location by location, and it's optional opt-in. It should be like according to the law, the workers decide how the tips get shared, and they decide whether to share them or not. Anything you want to add, James?
Nope. Tefa answered it really well.
I see a question. I see two questions, just kind of asking about impact of this on restaurants of different sizes.
Yeah, so it will impact all restaurants of all sizes. There is no like small restaurant carve out or longer time period with this ballot initiative. I will note, if this was passed as legislation, for example, there could have been a case where one of the compromises was like a small restaurant carve out or a longer time period. Again, this is not legislation, so we don't have that kind of ability to do things like that in the way that we might have had when we were trying to pass, in the way we might have had when this was a piece of legislation before it got on the ballot.
I see somebody also kind of bringing up a difference between kind of high-end restaurants and kind of less fancy restaurants when it comes to the way that kind of servers talk about tips, if you want to speak to that as well.
Yeah, there are like 3 different tiers of restaurants is what we see it as, like your mom and pops, your intermediate restaurant, and then your high end. I think that this is a long term versus the short term. I think that in the long term, if you think about it, one of talking about real estate, talking about gentrification, it is in the interest of an Applebee's to take down the mom and pops. And so who are the people that are funding the Massachusetts Restaurant Association, the National Restaurant Association, and who's funding the National Restaurant Association? Applebee's and Chipotle and the multinationals. Who is funding development? Billionaires. So in the maintaining our communities thriving as ours, this is an investment towards that. And so it does have an impact on middle and low rate work restaurants, an impact that means that they're going to be able to create work environments that are going to be good for their workers, for themselves, for their communities, where workers are going to be able to spend where they work. And we all know that when people make more money, they spend more money. And so it's also going to be continuing to motivate the economy.
I want to shout out, there's a good comment in the chat that looks at kind of the history of kind of the kind of racist roots of kind of having certain jobs subjected to sub-minimum wages. So I just want to draw that attention to that in the chat, going back to the kind of the Pullman Railroad workers and how often that there's a disproportionate impact in which jobs rely on tipped wage and sub-minimum wages. See a question about what jobs are currently subjected to the tipped wage.
great question. So it is primarily going to be servers and bartenders in restaurants and bars. However, the tipped minimum wage also affects, I believe, people who work in salons, and I think like another small group of people that I am not thinking of right now.
Salons and people, there are some service workers in their airports, like shuttle people and stuff like that, that also have tipped wages. So basically what it does that is really awesome and important and super important for many reasons, including that people like me are the people that usually have those jobs.
Mhm.
And particularly, I would probably be in that job if I had had a child 5 years ago, just being that real. Not to say that 5 years ago, I didn't have that job. I did. But people like me are seen as less than human in this world. And when we say no more sub-minimum wages, we're saying we're all worth it, dignity and labor in our workplace. And so what it does is it eliminates the classification of sub-minimum wage in the state level, and then we are all considered minimum wage workers.
Great. Let me see. For a few other questions, I see a question about what the impact on tipping ends up being. I think you spoke to this somewhat, but what has been the impact on tipping with the move to kind of one fair wage?
Yeah, so we know from data, and I'm happy to find a link to it and put it in a chat, but we know from other states that have done this that tipping continues to be the same, like same rates as other non-one fair wage states, if not higher tipping rates than non-one fair wage states. And I think a lot of that comes down to a couple different things, but one is we as a kind of culture have already been made to believe that tipping is a reward for really good service. It's a gratuity on top. But honestly, that's not the truth, but it's in the restaurant industries to make you think that. So if we were to have one fair wage in Massachusetts, then your tips would actually genuinely be a reward for good service, which is what it should be instead of a subsidy for low wages. I think the other reason that I want to lift up is when workers are getting paid more and they can rely on a certain amount in their paycheck every week or every other week, then they're going to be happier at work. And that means service will be better. When service is better, consumers like us are going to be tipping more, and that will lead to higher tipping rates. I will also note, as Tefa will probably mention at some point, is that servers and bartenders are actually like the best tippers ever.
I mean, we know some cases of some tippers that are bartenders that like they get so excited that they get a good service that they leave all of their tips from their shift to like someone just like out of excitement because we know what the work is. And yeah, I think that the impact, I actually have worked in a restaurant where I made $15 an hour, and my tips were actually better than in the other place that I worked at. And I was new in the industry. This is also, I think that's something that is very important about this question is to set people up to succeed that have been set up to not succeed, not to bother those who have already succeeded in the industry, right? So like when you're new in the industry, you need to be able to like move through it. And so as someone that worked as a new person doing bar back and during the day bartending, it was actually incredible. It was an incredible opportunity. The way that I was treated in my workplace was with respect and support. As a matter of fact, until today, I am friends with my manager and my owner, the owners of the place. And the difference was that they really did care about me and everyone that was there. And in the other restaurant that I worked at, actually how I left was because there was wage theft. And so I think that another thing that is really important about this is wage theft is the #1 crime in the US. And this is the industry that it is the most prevalent in. And the reason why it is prevalent is because of the use of sub-minimum wages. So this is like a direct vaccine is what I call it. Maybe I'm calling it the wrong thing. Are we going to get rid of all wage theft cases? No, but we will be giving people a real opportunity to have accountability in being paid their full wages.
I'll do one more one question that I see from the chat, and then kind of wrap up. But somebody asking like, what leg does the opposition stand on other than veiled self-interest? Like, to what extent, like, is there any actual opposition beyond like the self-interest of let's say the restaurant industry?
Honestly, no. And a lot of the opposition that we hear is either directly from the restaurant association, or it is from their workers who they have fed so much misinformation to, that we hear from workers that are scared that their tips will go away. And like, that is again a lie that's being spread by the restaurant association. That is a lie that's being spread by their bosses who don't want to pay them the full minimum wage plus tips on top. I
Wow.
would also add that for many of you who might have worked on the Fight for 15, like 6-7 years ago, if my math is right, a lot of the arguments that you heard when we were trying to fight for a higher minimum wage period are the same arguments you'll hear this time around. Things like the sky is going to fall down, restaurants are going to close, small businesses will close. And all of this is just, it's been like 6 years since we passed $15 an hour. The sky has not fallen. Things are still going fine in Massachusetts, and we are also able to visit our favorite stores, and we're also able to go to restaurants and stuff like that. So a lot of the arguments you'll hear then are the same things you'll hear now. And I urge you to not fall for that misinformation. And, you know, if someone comes to you saying this, like, please let them know the truth.
Yeah, and I think that the leg that they stand on is hate and misinformation, and the leg that we stand on is love and community and building. And that's why we, with your help and every community member, are going to do it. As someone that has been a worker in a union and not in a union, believe me, being able to say what you actually want when you don't have protections and when your food and your rent depend on it, um, it's hard. And so I would recommend that if you encounter someone, like, the best way to respond to a server that feels this way is asking them how they found out about it, asking them who told them that it was bad for them. And a lot of the times they're going to tell you, like, my boss or myself, because I'm so scared of change. And so one of the things that we really are combating here is the fear mongering that has happened in our communities, telling people like us that we don't deserve better and that our labor is not worth its full potential.
Awesome. And then you've already dropped it in the chat, but kind of James and Teffa, if people want to learn more about Question 5, where do they go?
Visit yeson5ma.com. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at yeson5ma. 5 is the number, not spelled out. And folks can always feel free to reach out to Teffa or myself at any time. I dropped our emails in the chat. Please excuse my typo in Teffa's name.
No worries. Can I get a round of Zoom applause for James Wu and Teffa Galvez? Thank you both so much.